You've just entered the No Delusion Zone. I'm David DeBatto. Today, my very special guest is Ilya Ponomarev. Ilya has been here before, and I'm very, very glad to have him back again. Ilya is a former member of the Russian Duma, lower house of the Russian parliament, and he was the only member of the Duma not to vote in favor of the Russian gay propaganda law. He abstained, and to vote against Russia's annexation in Crimea in March of 2014. In 2015, while in the United States, Ilya was formally charged in Russia with embezzlement, which he called politically motivated. In 2016, he was impeached for not performing his duties and went into exile in Ukraine, where he obtained a Ukrainian citizenship in 2019. Following the start of the 2022 full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, Ilya stated that he was joining Ukraine's territorial defense forces, and he denounced the invasion. Ilya also endorsed acts of sabotage and arson in Russia and launched a Russian language opposition television channel called February Morning. And as you can imagine, all of these actions by Ilya have not endeared him to the Kremlin or to Vladimir Putin, and he no longer celebrates New Year's in the Kremlin. So, having said all of that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you back, Ilya. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, David.
I don't mean to make light, of course, of what's going on with you or with the Kremlin, but sometimes I found that the best way to get through to some people and to ruin the facade of power of Putin is to make him look foolish, to poke fun at him, and I do that quite regularly. So I hope that's okay with you. Uh, let me start
Let's
here.
do it. Let's do it together. Yes.
Yes. Well, I encourage you actually to read an article of mine. It's online from 2 years ago, where I did a satirical interview with Vladimir Vladimirovich, where I talked about the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and I, of course, did not talk to him in person, but it was very similar to Tucker Carlson's interview, except he looked like a total fool. So, if you get a chance, you might want to read that. Uh, Let me ask you this, and I want to start actually by going to a very serious topic. You were the subject of an assassination attempt last year. In fact, where you and I believe your wife were injured in a drone attack. Could you tell us about that, please?
Oh yeah, they tried to hit my house with four Shahed drones. These Iranian drones that Russia has procured and is using extensively on Ukraine. So there was 2 nights of attacks. Actually, first night we thought that it was just an accident that they felt not far from our house, was like 30 to 50 meters radius where they hit. But we thought that okay, so it's maybe our anti-missile defenses are working, stuff like that. But no, the next day they hit the house directly, and thanks God they missed a little bit from the bedroom, like 5 meters away. So we were injured, wounded, but we survived. But okay, so we're at war.
And where did this take place? Where were you at the time?
At home, so it's next to Kiev suburbs.
Okay. There was also an email phishing attack against you and many, many other officials, former officials, and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they tried to use our friendship with Mike McFaul to hack into our computers.
Former
I think
ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Russia, Mike McPhail.
McFaul, yes, and he was a special advisor to President Obama on Eurasia. Yes, so I think they got a little bit uh, uh, more far with him, and I think that they managed to extract some information from his computer. With mine, they were not so successful. I am a former IT guy, so it was it was more difficult for them. Now FBI is investigating.
Have you been the subject of other phishing attacks, other email attacks? Again, trying to do the same thing to get your information or to put a virus in your system. Has that happened since then?
No, look, that's happening virtually every single day. It's just that you never know which are the attacks which are being directed by Kremlin and which are just regular commercial phishing and stuff like that. But in general, yes, as soon as you are active and your email is known, yeah, there are many people and many attempts, and you have to protect yourself very diligently.
We're going to talk, of course, a lot and focus on what's going on right now with yourself and with Ukraine and vis-a-vis Russia. But I do want to, if you could, for people who have not seen you before, at least not on my channel, very briefly go through, I don't know what you want to call it, your metamorphosis, your change, your opinion change in your life from, say, oh, I don't know, 2011 until you actually were exiled and left Russia. Tell us a little bit about that process, your votes, the charges against you, and when you finally decided that's it and you left.
For many outside observers, my bio sometimes looks as full of different bands and changes, and that it's very multidimensional. For me, it's a straight line. So I always was very much inspired to change the world. I'm a committed idealist in this sense, and I was thinking in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed that the best way for it is through business activities, and I was a very successful IT entrepreneur in Russia. I started the first venture capital fund in Russia, and done many other stuff like this. But in the year 2000s, when Putin was back, it was clear, okay, so KGB is back, so we need to do something about it. And so I went back into politics. And from that time, I was always at the pretty radical flank of left-wing politics, left-wing, because I always felt like the thing that we need to do is unveil the potential of a human being to its fullest. So I'm not a leftist in the term of European social democracy. I'm rather left libertarian person, but I always believed in the power of the people and self-government, direct democracy, and my also IT background contributed a lot to this, and so I built resistance from that. And after 2014, Putin went too far. I try to be in different compromises with the system to reform it from the win to prefer evolution over the revolution. And at certain times, I was very close to President Medvedev, spearheading his economy modernization approach, and the Skolkovo and the Russian Silicon Valley and entrepreneurs and venture capital and all this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, none of this worked. Putin was back. He started the war. I stood against the war, and after that, I'm fighting, and that's what I am doing. Although recently, I'm moving more and more towards again the technology aspect of the warfare, because throughout the last 3 years, we have learned a lot here in Ukraine. What could be really disruptive for the enemy army, like Putin's army, and we are doing a lot of asymmetrical technological stuff like drones and radio electronic warfare and different fighting management systems, which none of the other countries have, and which are, from one side, very cheap. They were all produced by grassroots initiative by the people themselves, but essentially it was them who deterred the aggression. We all are very thankful for international help and for HIMARSes and ATACMSes and artillery and tanks and everything. But at the end of the day, which managed to deter the aggression is this smaller things that were produced in Ukraine, and now we wanted to return it to the world. And it's actually, recently President Trump is speaking a lot about rare earths and different mineral resources in Ukraine. He lives in the previous century. The thing that he needs to ask for it's exactly those smaller drones and these new technologies. That's what would be the real game changer. And if America wants to return its greatness and protect Taiwan and and do other stuff, that's what it needs to be looking at.
Well, I agree with you, and we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. The adaptability, the innovations that the Ukrainians have made is nothing short of spectacular. And you mentioned drones, but we could talk about any of the innovations that they've made in their not just their military, but their economy. Their way of fighting the aggressor is nothing short of spectacular. I want to get back to something else that you mentioned briefly because it's very important, I believe, especially to the American people. You are a voice in the wilderness, in a way, in terms of Russians speaking out against the war. Yes, there are many in exile, no question about it. Many media platforms from Russia that have gone into exile, and individuals such as yourself. But I want to ask you about the Russian people. I know many Russians still living in Russia, and I am very well aware of the difficulties they are in terms of speaking out. I understand this. The repression there is at least as bad as it was during the Soviet Union. It's dangerous to speak out. What is your sense of the average Russian's true feelings to one, Putin, two, continuing this war in Ukraine? If they were allowed to speak, what do you think the average, not the oligarchs and not the older diehard I love Stalin types, but what is the average Russian thinking about all of this?
In general, the situation in Russia best is being compared with the situation in Nazi Germany during World War II, in terms of the attitude of the society, the state of minds. I recently was reading a lot of researchers, with facts and with sociology and with personal evidence, letters from people in Nazi Germany of that time. You can easily replace Germany with Russia, Hitler with Putin, and you would receive exactly the right picture of modern day Russia. People were not happy with the war. They, in general, like normal people, they never happy with war, and they just felt that they cannot do anything about it. And after it all started, and the horrible war crimes happened at the field, and they were definitely promoted by Kremlin. So it's not that they staged them, but for them, unfortunately, it was absolutely acceptable. They thought that it's a good way to scare Ukrainians, to subjugate them, and to instill fear. And when Russians started to realize what actually happened, despite that they publicly denounced it, it was like, no, it's all fake news. It never happened. But inside themselves, they do understand that it's all true. And now they more or less, okay, so now we need to win. Otherwise, we'll be seriously punished for this. And it's exactly the same thing as it was during World War II with Germans and with Jews. Some observers which try to acquit Germans, they say, Germans, they didn't know anything about the Holocaust. And no, in reality, they all knew. They all knew, and when the serious attacks on Germany started coming in, like the bombardment of Hamburg and other stuff, for them it was a retaliation against for what they have done with Jews, and then they were saying, okay, so now we need to fight back, otherwise we will be all eliminated here, and that's plus minus what we see in Russia. So right now, sociology suggests that approximately 70% of Russians want peace. And actually, it's a serious demand. Putin cannot ignore it. And 90% of Russian elites also strive for peace. But it's peace on their terms. So they want peace, but they want so that it would be, if not a complete victory, but a victory of a sorts. And that allows Putin to stay afloat because he is like a guarantor that such victory would actually be achieved. And when they see the rhetorics that is coming from the West, they're being inspired that yes, Putin is doing everything right, and maybe we were wrong that we started the war. But okay, so it's all done deal now, and we just need to get out of this somehow.
You know, for people like me, and there are millions of people like me in America, throughout Europe, those that are not, that support Ukraine very much and are not taken in by the Kremlin propaganda or even the MAGA propaganda, hearing that the Russian people want peace, which I believe, but on their terms, that they now feel so badly or not guilty. They need to win. Otherwise, they're going to be severely punished. So they have no choice, just as the Germans did towards the end of World War II. That just makes my blood boil because there's no conscience there. There's no sense of guilt. There's no sense of, well, we did this. We need to pay for this. Or when this is all over, maybe we can start to atone for our sins. No, it's the exact opposite. We did this horrible thing, but now we need to win so we're not punished. It's disgraceful and it's disgusting, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. It is what it is, and it's again, it's the same thing. It's the same thing like in Germany. So maybe 10% of the population is genuinely against the war, and they feel the guilt, and they want to compensate, but all others, no.
Yeah, and I don't hate them for it. I understand the situation, and it is what it is. Very briefly, what happened with the Prigozhin showed the world, I think, that Putin has very little support. If anyone actually did follow through on something like this, that it would fall like a house of cards. Hasn't happened yet, which leads me to my next question. You have in the past, and maybe still currently, advocate armed rebellion against Putin as the only way to really do away with him, to change the regime in Russia. Do you still advocate armed rebellion to change the Russian regime?
Obviously, yes, and I am absolutely certain that this is the colossus on the clay eggs, legs, and eggs, by the way, which can collapse at any given moment. And I think it just needs to be pushed. And I think that Prigozhin's mutiny was actually a proof of my concept. And things that were happening after that in Kursk region is another evidence of the same thing. Nobody, literally nobody is ready to defend this regime. They are ready to fight in Ukraine at the front lines for money. And it's a certain part of the population which just being bribed, literally, paid a lot of money, but money is what Putin has because it sells a lot of oil and gas internationally, and the world still sees to stop it, unfortunately. And so he has a lot of money. He has money to spend. He is spending on those guys who are willing to go to Ukraine, even get slaughtered by it, pay for their families, and get them out of misery and poverty that the whole system has submerged them into. But that's a very specific layer of society, which is not very significant. But when it's coming to an actual assault on the regime, nobody is standing in between. They are stepping aside. It's the same 70% of people whom we were talking about. Yeah, they would like the good guys to win, but who are the good guys? They're not so sure. So who is winning is the good guy. And whether it would be people from the outside, the whole rhetorics of Putin that Russians and Ukrainians are one nation actually contributes to this, because even if Ukrainians win, it doesn't matter, we're one nation. So, we don't care if it would be Americans, or Chinese coming in. Yes, we could have been concerned, but Ukrainians, no, not so much, so we just step aside and look at this as a mere observers. And this society of observation, a totally amorphic society which totally lacks any solidarity from within, it's exactly the state of Russian society of today.
Well, that goes back hundreds of years, doesn't it, Ilya? That's just a fatalism, the part of Russian society that's been beat into them for hundreds of years. They've never had any freedom, and looking to the future is why plan? I may not live tomorrow, or if I do, it's going to be worse than today. So whoever wins, wins, and I'll still be here.
Well, you know, fatalism to me is a certain mask that Russians, yeah, like to wear because it's a mask they used to. And you're absolutely right. It's a long-standing tradition, you know, because when you live under oppressive political system, that's the most convenient position that you can take. But look, for example, at the best moments in Russian history, say the civil war of 1918 to 1920. The whole country was on the move. The whole country felt like their fates in their own hands. World War II, what Russians are calling the Great Patriotic War, is the same thing. Everybody was on the move. They were defending themselves because they felt it's the right cause. It's the good deed. You know, that's something that we need to do. And they didn't need any encouragement from the top, any push or whatever, because they were doing it themselves. So this passion, it's still within the society. It's very well hidden, but it's ready to explode at any given moment. It's just that they need to be shown that this is the time.
I may be wrong, and I get attacked about this all the time, but deep down, I like the Russian people. I have for a very long time because I believe what you just
Yeah,
said.
that makes two of us,
Well,
right?
I know, but because I believe in here, they're good people. They don't always express it for the reasons that we're talking about. But you know, I like I said, I've been to Russia many times. I know many Russians, and they're just good people. And this is just a horrible situation that we're in right now. Let me ask you this, and goes back too far, and I don't want to stay with it. Why did Prigozhin fail? What happened? Why did that fizzle out, in your opinion?
Oh, I think that first of all, he never stood against Putin. I think that he stood against the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, the General Chief of Staff, Mr. Gerasimov. But I didn't think that he actually stood against Putin. I think that he was always a very devoted and loyal Putinist in his heart, and he wanted, just to defend his boss. And that's why when he was delivered a message that, yeah, you have been heard, and Putin would fix everything, we'll fire those bastards, so it would jail them. And actually, eventually, Putin did exactly that. He fired them, he jailed them, so all of the Ministry of Defense was completely demolished like half a year later after the mutiny. So that's when Prigozhin decided, okay, if my demands are being met, then it's all fine. Obviously, Putin could not tolerate the disloyalty and such an undisciplined move, and that costed Mr. Prigozhin dearly. But still, I think it was not a mutiny against Putin. But it doesn't matter because in terms of how people saw it, people thought it was genuine. People were scared. All the people who were supposed to defend Putin, his inner circle, all these FSBs, this National Guard people, the police, all the secret forces, they all vanished. So that's exactly what they would do next
The
time.
road to Moscow was wide open. The road to the
Yeah,
Kremlin,
absolutely.
actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Last question on that issue. I don't believe, of course, anything that's on social media, and certainly nothing that comes out of Russia. But there have been many stories over the last several weeks about attempted assassination attempts on Putin. Do you believe that is increasing? That's just Kremlin propaganda for a diversion, or do you believe that some forces are actually closing in around him finally?
No, I don't think this is happening. I think Kremlin is deliberately spreading different rumors like this because their rationale is extremely simple. If Putin has a lot of doubles, if there are a lot of attempts which all fail, then the real assassination attempt would be discouraged from happening. Because you would, even if you are successful, you never know whom are you hitting. So that's why I think it's Putin's agents within the so-called Russian opposition who is spreading this. But no, I don't believe it's happening. When it would happen once, and it would be very clear. It could be again taking the parallel with Nazi Germany. It could be a failed coup of Stauffenberg of 1944, or it can be a successful one. We all hope it would be a successful one, but nevertheless, everybody would understand that it was actually serious. And again, taking the parallel with Nazi Germany, I think it's very useful for us to take those parallels, despite all the historical parallels are pretty risky. But I think it's useful because they understand what are the circumstances, what are the prerequisites for something to happen. In Germany, it happened in July 1944. So when it was already clear that everything is lost, it was already again after the Normandy D-Day. It was after Germany lost almost all of its conquered territory in the Soviet Union. So like it was a done deal already. And I think it's more or less here. So when the Russian elites would understand that Putin is done. And that can happen only if we are successful in our sanctions policies, if we manage to make this regime be totally isolated, that if we restrict access to money for Putin's folks, then they would start actually doing things. Before that, everything is fine with them. So, and they feel safe and they feel like, okay, maybe we will not win in Ukraine in reality, but at least we'll be allowed to save face and we will not lose there.
I agree with you. I thought it was BS, just another Russian or Kremlin disinformation. But I wanted to get your opinion, and you pretty much confirmed what I thought. Moving along to the most important story, in my opinion, which is Ukraine. Uh, if you don't already know, I was not thrilled about the fact that Donald Trump won the election. And things have gone downhill in a big way since January 20th. Having said that, what's the mood there right now in Ukraine? I mean, I ask everybody this in Kyiv, but what's your sense of the mood in Ukraine right now as on what Donald Trump may do in terms of peace negotiations to end the war?
Well, look, the mood is very simple. We were fighting before, and we are ready to fight onwards. And nothing has changed because it's our motherland. It does not depend on whether Americans will support it or not support it. As I said, there are growing sources of internal technologies, you know, and yeah, this whole international assistance is extremely important, but it's not that Ukraine would surrender without it. It just would cost us time and lives. Unfortunately, you know, lives of very best Ukrainians, men and women. But what can we do? We hope that Europeans would continue to support. But at the end of the day, you know, right now I'm just saying it like America has already given up on Ukraine, which I don't believe is the case. I think that the Trump's administration really wants, you know, to push the fighting into a different dimension from the military into more economic side of things. I don't believe that Trump is a friend of Putin in any sense. I do believe that the new administration really wants to separate Russia from China. I think that just their priorities are different. For them, China is a real arch rival, arch competitor, and Russia is a minor thing, is a more regional thing, and you let Europeans take care of it, which I think is a mistake, which is coming from not so sophisticated understanding of the landscape, and I think that Russia is significantly empowering China, and it's important to actually defeat Putin's regime, and that's the only way how you can separate Russia from China. But I think they would learn, and I think they are right now in a very active learning process. People next to Trump in the foreign policy, like Mike Waltz or Kit Kellogg or Marco Rubio, these are people whom I know for ages. I know well, and I respect them a lot because I think they are standing on the right positions, especially Mike Waltz. And yes, they are in the system which they are loyal to. They have their bosses, their superiors, which may think differently. But at the end of the day, they would influence the situation as well. They would sway the situation in a certain direction, and I think this is the right direction. And so I'm not pessimistic. I would say I'd actually think that Trump's victory is a stress to the system, which we all needed. I actually was pretty pessimistic about Biden's administration because I thought that it's a dead end, and I think that these guys are too old to act. And despite that, they were generally the good guys, but I thought that they would never do the right things on the Ukrainian front. And with Trump, who knows? We need to see.
Well, I agree with you about Biden. I don't even want to go there. I've spent so many hours and words talking about Biden and his disgraceful performance with Ukraine. I'll leave it there. But as far as being, you're not pessimistic about Trump now, that makes one of us because I have less than a lot of faith that he's going to do the right thing. Because as you know, he's a very transactional individual. His whole philosophy is, how is this good for me? Not so much
Yes.
America, not so much America, not and certainly not about Ukraine. It's what's good for
But yeah, that give us the opportunity to play with. You
well,
see, like
yes.
with this rare earth, right? I think it was a completely correct thing on the Ukrainian behalf to offer this because this is something that he bought and that's buying him on our side, which is fantastic. And we need this investment anyway. So, we need the Marshall Plan. And they was saying about Gaza Strip that he sees the Gaza Strip as a great construction yard, as a real estate project. Look, Ukraine is 10 times more than Gaza in terms of a construction yard. Please come. We will greatly appreciate. Please bring your companies. Turn us into a construction yard. That's what Ukrainians would appreciate. That's good thing. Fantastic.
Oh, I agree with you. No, look, with this person like Trump, you have to play to his weaknesses. And his weakness is you have to butter him up, you have to compliment him, and show him how this is good for him, money-wise, how he's going to come out of this on top financially. And yes, I think that was a brilliant move by President Zelensky, and I hope it works out. I don't know if Putin is going to buy that. I mean, when I say buy that, if this works out, where Ukraine will give or make some kind of a deal where the United States gets as much rare minerals as they need from Ukraine in support or in to send them the weapons, ammunition that they need. I don't know how Putin's going to take that. And I don't think that Putin is going to accept, even if we draw the lines, if it's negotiated where he gets to keep the occupied territories as long as NATO or some bilateral agreement with NATO nations puts boots on the ground in Ukraine to guard against Russia invading again. I don't think Putin's going to buy that. And if he does, and you know this, it's going to be only a matter of time. He's going to use that time to rebuild his army and just trash any agreement that he has. What are your thoughts?
No, I fully agree with what you said, and I think that like whatever solution that would be discussed right now during this anticipated negotiations is a temporary solution. Is not a permanent one because I don't think that we can end the war while Putin is in the office. I think it's just impossible. I think it's irrevocably linked one to another. To win the war, not even to win to end the war, you need to remove Putin. That's the end of the story. There is no other way how the war can be ended. But a temporary ceasefire is possible. and it's negotiable. And I think that this is something that is being discussed at the moment. And the more skin in the game the new administration would have together on the Ukrainian side, the better it is, because there is no skin in the game on the Russian side. And the only thing that Putin can offer is this relationship with China, but we can all make bets that he cannot drift away from China. He maybe can, to a certain degree, abandon support of Iran. That's probably he can do, but with China, Putin, that's his safety belt. So I don't think that this is negotiable, and there is now nothing else that he can offer to this team. In what other senses they are competitors, and that's why Ukraine needs to skillfully play whatever cards the country got, and Zelensky is trying to do exactly this at the moment, and I applaud this. And then, as soon as the ceasefire would be negotiated, we all need to remember that it's temporary. We need to rearm, especially eastern flank of NATO, especially with those new technologies, and maybe even with Ukrainian military, because now Ukraine has a lot of trained military personnel, which can be deployed on the borders with Russia in the Baltic states, for example, and in Poland, and train the local people, and distribute this battleground experience, which all is very much needed. So there are a lot of things to do after the ceasefire, and if the Trump's team is ready to make money in Ukraine by doing the reconstruction, that's great. That's all Ukrainians would appreciate, and let them do more money.
Well, I agree with you, and not only the reconstruction, but I believe if we pay Ukraine, or if Ukraine pays us through the money that they're going to get for these rare minerals, well, that can go right into their defense industry. That can go right into artillery shells and artillery and drones and aircraft and whatever else they need. It would be a win-win. Look, I've said recently on some podcasts, I believe Ukraine right now has not the second, the first, the strongest army in Europe, in NATO right now, possibly behind Poland, because they've really been increasing their defense budget. But other than that, they are possibly the second largest military in Europe, but the first in combat experience. So I would say that they are the best army, the military right now in Europe, and they can be NATO's reserve if need be, or deploy for NATO in the future after this. And I think President Zelensky's actually offered this exact concept to NATO. They can also be the test bed, or the cradle, if you will, of arms. They can supplant NATO and even the United States in terms of innovation and arms for NATO based on what they've done in the war. I'm a big fan of what Ukraine has done and what they can do in the future. So, look, I always say this about Trump: even a broken clock is correct twice a day. Okay. And so I think the one is on immigration. I've actually always agreed with him on that. And second, maybe if he agrees with President Zelensky's offer for these rare minerals trade, whereas he supplies them with all the weapons that they need. I think that's a great idea. A lot needs to be negotiated, as you said, because you don't trust Putin or Russia to live up to the terms of any agreement. They're going to use that time to rearm and retrain and rebuild to attack again, only this time in much greater fashion. So NATO has to be prepared for that, because I don't know if the United States would back them up after this negotiation. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, but NATO would have to. So no, look, I agree with you. I think that this may work out. There has to be a ceasefire very, very soon. There has to be, for a number of reasons. And if it works out that it's because of this rare mineral exchange, and there's a ceasefire and an occupied zone with NATO troops or two NATO nations, that will have to work. And I think it can work if NATO gets off its ass grows a spine, and there is enough time for the Ukrainians to continue to build their defense industry. Last question for you, if I could, Ilya. Are you aware of any significant liaison or outreach from the Ukrainian defense industry to the American defense industry to work even closer in collaboration than they are now?
Look, there are right now a lot of different links, connections, discussions, gossip, like you name it. There are numerous of investors circling around Ukraine for defense tech, mil-tech projects. But there is a significant burden, which is mainly on the Ukrainian side, which is the lack of experience of Ukrainian entrepreneurs which created those technologies. And so sometimes it's they are coming completely out of the blue. So I know the former prime minister of Ukraine who turned into a major drone producer, who never had any technological experience. I know a person who was painting walls and who is now producing the guided bombs, which are being used on F-16s, actually, very cheaply. He's turning traditional Russian, unguided, dump bombs into a smart devices. The guy had absolutely no technological expertise in the past. I know people who were doing entertainment planes, which turned into be a major producer of these long-range strike drones recently. And they also have zero business experience in the West. So they need to be trained, educated. It's a very specific markets. So they need to be supported a lot. And that's exactly what I personally is trying to do in the recent year, because I think that's the very next big thing which is associated with Ukraine. That's how actually Ukraine can thank the world for all the military assistance was coming in to actually defend the free world and provide these asymmetrical defenses against all the kind of bad guys who actually flourish in many countries.
We're going to have to leave it there. Ilya, I really, really appreciate you coming back on the No Delusion Zone, providing your insight and opinions on what's going on, being on the ground there in Kiev and being involved very, very, very strongly in the anti-Putin crusade and advocating, actually, as you've said here again, that the only way to solve what's going on right now with Russia and the world, not just the Ukrainian war, is to do away with Putin. And that's going to take an armed rebellion, in your opinion. So I appreciate your courage in saying that. So Ilya Ponomarev, thank you very much for coming back to the No Delusion Zone. You take care, stay safe, and stay sane.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.